And we're back. Greetings, everyone. This is Lucian Vâlsan, broadcasting from Cluj-Napoca, Transylvania for the 101st time. And as always, alongside with me is Herr Jon Gunnarsson, broadcasting from Deutschland, and our producer James Huff, making sure everything is working just fine and broadcasting from the US. Greetings, Mr. Gunnarsson.
Hello there. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, except for my disdain for the current weather. It's been raining for over 24 hours without any sign of stopping anytime soon, which caused a lot of disruptions with my internet connection. Now it seems to be working just fine, but it made me worry a little bit on whether I'll be able to show up for the showtime or not.
Well, over here the weather is pretty much fine. It's not very warm, but at least sort of around noon the sun was shining, and then we were out in the sun. It was kind of warmish, so can't really complain.
Yeah, no, yesterday was actually more like summer, like 30 degrees in Celsius during the day,
Okay.
sunny and whatnot. But during the evening, it started raining cats and dogs. And although the temperature is still nice even now, it's like 21 degrees at this moment, which is 9 p.m. local time. So the temperature is fine. The rain and the wind is not fine.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
nothing you can do about that.
Nothing I can do about that. It's probably because the weather has learned about the latest United Nations report, and
Probably probably some god up there is crying.
yeah. So yeah, let's go straight to the news. The first one is from the United Nations Women.org, obviously a totally unbiased website, and definitely an organization built for the greater good. UNWomen.org, urgent action needed to combat online violence against women and girls, says new UN report. Millions affected globally, but most countries still failing to effectively address the growing problem. A new report released today, that is yesterday, by the United Nations Broadband Commission, they have a broadband commission at the UN, anyway, reveals that almost 3/4 of women online have been exposed to some form of cyber violence, and urges governments and industry to work harder and more effectively together to better protect the growing number of women and girls who are victims of online threats and harassment. The report notes that despite the rapidly growing number of women experiencing online violence, only 26% of law enforcement agencies in 86 countries surveyed are taking appropriate action. Entitled Cyber Violence Against Women and Girls, a worldwide wake-up call, the report was released earlier today at an event at United Nations headquarters in New York by the Commission's Working Group on Gender, which is co-chaired by UNDP Administrator Helen Clark and UN Under-Secretary General and UN Women Executive Director Fumzile Mlambo Ngcuka. Okay, I got that right. Working group members, which also include representatives from the tech sector and civil society, hope the report will mobilize the public and private sectors to establish concrete strategies aimed at stemming the rising tide of online violence against women. Without concerted global action to curb the various escalating forms of online violence, an unprecedented surge of cyber violence against women and girls could run rampant and significantly impede the uptake of broadband by women everywhere, the report contends. It notes that cyber violence against women and girls already exists in many forms, including online harassment, public shaming, the desire to inflict physical harm, sexual assault, murders, and induced suicides. The report spread of the internet means that effective legal and social controls of online antisocial and criminal behaviors continue to be an immense challenge. And in the age of social internet and everywhere, anywhere, anytime mobile access, cyber violence can strike at any time and can relentlessly follow its targets everywhere they go. In this report, we're arguing that complacency and failure to address and solve cyber violence could significantly impede the uptake of broadband services by girls and women worldwide, said ITU Secretary General Hulan Zhao, who serves as co-vice chair of the Broadband Commission alongside UNESCO Director General Irina Bokova. The net is an amazing resource for personal empowerment, and we need to ensure that as many girls and women as possible benefit from the amazing possibilities it offers. Key findings of the report include one, an estimated 73% of women have already been exposed or have experienced some form of online violence. Women in the age range of 18 to 24 are uniquely likely to experience stalking and sexual harassment in addition to physical threats. 9 million women in the European Union alone have experienced online violence as young as 15 years old. 1 in 5 female internet users live in countries where harassment and abuse of women online is extremely unlikely to be punished. I didn't know there is a huge tech hub in Democratic Republic of Congo, but anyway. In many countries, women are reluctant to report their victimization for fear of social repercussions. Cyber violence against women and girls puts a premium on emotional bandwidth, personal and workplace time, financial resources, and missed wages. Skipping a bit, online violence has subverted the original positive promise of the Internet's freedoms and in too many circumstances has made it a chilling place that permits anonymous cruelty and facilitates harmful acts towards women and girls, said UN Women's whatever. We want to reclaim and expand the opportunities it offers. That means recognizing the scale and depth of the damage being done and taking strong concerted steps to call it and stop it. Abuse online is still abuse with potency and very real consequences. The report presents a set of key recommendations proposing a global framework based around the 3 S: sensitization, safeguards, and sanctions. The report argues that rigorous oversight and enforcement of rules banning cyber violence against women and girls on the Internet will be an essential foundation stone if the Internet is to become a safe, respectful, and empowering space for women and girls, and by extension, for boys and men.
I love that extension.
Also, for those listening, just click on the link. You see a lot of heroes for freedom and justice and freedom of expression and freedom from harassment there. We have the victimology expert and all-time hero, or as I like to call plain old cunt, Anita Sarkeesian in there, and you also have...
she is titled as a survivor of cyber violence.
Yes. Yes, the survivor of cyber violence with the disabled ratings and disabled comments, and yeah, we know. And then right next to her is the epitome of honesty and ethics and empowerment, comrade Zoe Quinn. So yeah, this whole thing is just absolutely fabulous. We know that it's honest. It's not like there is some command and control ideology behind it. No, it can't be that.
Of course not. The UN would never do that.
Yeah, it's not like the UN would ever do that, yeah. On the other hand, given the efficiency that the UN has had in recent decades, even with far more serious business, such as, I don't know, let's say mitigating wars or mitigating refugees of war, I don't know, the Rwanda massacre comes to mind as a recent episode. Given the efficiency that the UN has had even in more serious business, I don't think we should be concerned about this, should we?
Yeah, I mean, the UN is for the most part just a glorified debating society, so... I mean, sort of, if you're living in sort of third world country, the UN can actually exert a lot of pressure on those countries. But sort of for people living in sort of more prosperous countries, the UN, they can just basically safely ignore whatever the UN says, more or less.
Yeah, although recently the UN has launched an investigation against Switzerland for allegedly using torture. Just right in the same day when videos of torture used in Saudi Arabia have emerged, but of course Saudi Arabia is the chair of the Committee of Human Rights, so of course we can't have that. The whole thing is just a joke. It really is. An utterly tasteless joke, but a joke nonetheless. On the other hand, you said that, those of us living in, I don't know, Europe or North America, we could probably safely ignore what the UN says. Yeah, that's true. But on the other hand, let me throw something at you. A British follower of my YouTube channel, gave me this link and asked me if I could make a video about it. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But he told me, and he's correct, that when these kinds of reports emerge, usually European and Western governments in general tend to rub their hands and use it as an excuse to push for more control. And in a particular case of Britain, which already has quite a few precedents of censoring and regulating the internet, as well as putting people in jail for what they say on the internet, I could reasonably see more of that coming down the pipeline thanks to these kinds of shenanigans pulled by these con artists at the UN.
Yeah, but you said it yourself, these kinds of reports are an excuse for doing these things that the governments want to do anyway, so I don't think this report will change all that much. I mean, it's certainly not a good thing, but I think its impact will be rather limited.
Yeah, and also for the Gamergates out there are like, oh, how can the UN call these con artists and whatnot? I think they kind of deserved each other. I mean, in my opinion, I'm surprised that they haven't also called Jonathan McIntosh, or maybe they hope that Anita will spout whatever he wants to. They kind of deserved each other, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. As for McIntosh, I mean, the problem is that he's a man and therefore not as useful as a victim or a survivor.
Yeah, fair enough.
Correct on the show.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I don't know what else is to say about this. Women in the age range of 18 to 24 are uniquely likely to experience stalking in addition to physical threats. Source?
I mean, it does link to some sort of report which is rather lengthy, and I have just sort of scanned it and looked at some of the things that they consider harassment, and they sort of have these 6 categories, which are actually not that loose as I thought. So it's sort of surprising to me that the number is that high. Of course, it also always depends on sort of how rigorously they apply these categories. But for example, they define harassment only as things which are repeated often and sort of one or two time nasty messages or whatever do not count as harassment according to this report. So yeah, but I mean, with this number, what is it? 84% of what it was.
73%.
Or 73%. That seems sort of high given those numbers. I mean, that's probably a significant number of women who don't even use the internet or hardly ever use the internet. So therefore, they can't really be victims of cyber violence, if you want to use that word. So that's probably more than a quarter of women who basically never use the internet. So that seems sort of weird.
Yeah, and my position is that internet harassment, for the most part, doesn't exist. I mean, come on. Some troll is keeping on tweeting you nasty stuff. Use the block button. Close the window. Come on, seriously? You need a big state, worldwide government to protect you from nasty tweets? Come on.
I mean, I will say that harassment does exist in the internet, but violence not. I mean, harassment. For example, things like hacking or DDoS attacks and stuff like that can really be seriously
Yes,
disruptive.
but those are already crimes. We don't need a worldwide bureaucracy to redefine it as cyber violence. Those are already crimes, and they're crimes even in third world countries.
Yeah, of course, but I mean,
DDoSing is already a crime.
Yeah, but that's sort of the sort of stuff that also falls under this category of cyber violence, according to the report.
Okay, fair enough, but then again, that's beating a dead horse. I mean, the discussion on whether DDoSing should be a crime or not has already happened decades ago, and has already been put in place into law. I mean, what there's more to say?
I don't know. Apparently, according to this report, women have it worse, which is not surprising from these kinds of reports. Though it's always strikes me as interesting when they present these numbers that they never compare it to the rates for men, and it's I would probably assume that the rates for men, if you use the same sort of definitions, would be higher,
Probably higher, yes.
but they never tell you that. They just talk about violence against women and girls, and that's just supposed to end that's just supposed to end the discussion, and that's just bad by definition, and therefore we have to protect women and children, even if it is in categories where men and boys are actually more affected.
Yeah, again, in my opinion, the bureaucracies should have no say whatsoever over nasty tweets and this kind of uh, petty nonsense. I'm even reluctant to use the term harassment because, unlike real life harassment, the ways of avoiding it are numerous. It's not like it's not comparable. That's why I'm reluctant to use the same word. I don't know,
Yeah,
maybe I'm too
the thing
old for
is,
this, but
people
to me,
can't.
words actually matter.
Yeah, the thing is, people can't punch you in the face through a screen.
Yes, yeah, they can't punch you in the face, and also this one that but they published my address and whatnot, and then when you look and examine the claim, they usually had already had that address published by
Yeah.
themselves somewhere else. So what essentially happened is someone accessing a public resource and just reprinting it. I'm sorry, if you don't want your address to be published, don't publish your address never anywhere by yourself.
Yeah, I
Is it really
mean,
that hard?
most people nowadays dox themselves. You don't need to
Yes.
dox them from some sort of malicious hacker who, I don't know, finds out your address through some nefarious means. It's published in all sorts of places, in Facebook and all sorts of other social media.
Yes. Mine is not published, which is a reason why nobody knows it. But yeah, most people do indeed dox themselves, and I don't know. I don't think even if we are to take it for granted that but that's a huge problem and women have it worse. Okay, fine. How is a worldwide bloated NGO, because that's what UN is, uh, how is going to solve that? And how would even the strongest state imaginable, how is it going to solve that? Force women to no longer publish their details online?
I don't know, maybe they're going to put a policeman into every home, and if you put your information online, this is going to arrest you.
Yeah, I don't know. Or are they going to take the same approach? Teach thieves not to break, not to steal. Not don't teach me not to safeguard my purse. Because if that is going to be the approach, which I kind of expect from these kinds of ideologues, uh, well, good luck with achieving any tangible results on that.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, good luck telling the random Ann on 8chan or on Half-chan that but it's not a good thing to copy paste this person's address from their own Facebook and publish it on Pastebin. Yeah, good luck. Good luck convincing them. They're certainly going to give a toss.
yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
let's go to the next one. Oh, the next one sounds like an PC topic.
Okay, this one is from the Mittelbayerische. It's entitled Lucke, Asylum Only for Women and Children. Alpha, the new party which split off from the AfD, has called for a stricter limit for the admission of refugees. Germany could no longer accept refugees without limitation, party founder Bernd Lucke said on Monday in Berlin. Quote, of course, Germany should generously accept refugees, but it must be master over how many of them can come. End quote. Above all, immigration should be restricted to families, children, and women. Quote, we should focus our aid on those who are especially needy, Lucke said during the presentation of the party program. In the opinion of Alpha's founder, refugees should register themselves in the countries they first arrive in or apply for asylum directly in the embassies and in temporary refuges closer to home. Thus, the number of new arrivals in Germany is to be drastically reduced. Moreover, one could, quote, use military means to establish safe zones in Syria, end quote, in which refugees could be housed safely. The article goes on after that, basically talking about other things about this new party and so on. So I'm going to skip that.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Just for context, Bernd Lucke was the founder of the AfD, which was a sort of mixture of sort of a liberal and conservative party. Liberal in the sort of the European sense, in the classic liberal sense, and he was sort of more on the liberal branch of that party, and now there's been sort of a split with Frauke Petri, who was sort of the leader of the conservative wing of that party, who basically took over the party, and since then Lucke has left the party and founded this new party. Yeah, and it's sort of in the past, the AfD has sort of been a sort of the only major party in Germany that was actually sort of fairly critical of feminism and did have some sort of positive initiatives for men. So this is kind of disappointing to me that this kind of rhetoric would come out of Lucke, with this sort of assumption that if you're a man, that automatically means you're not as much in need as a woman or a child. So that is something I find really annoying.
It is annoying, and as you know, and the people who follow my channel definitely do know, I've been following this quote-unquote refugee crisis. I call it an invasion because, let's face it, it kind of is. Yeah, I don't like that kind of rhetoric either. I mean, I would, if there are things to be found wrong with this particular crisis, the bigger problem would be that a significant portion of them, actually a majority of them, are not refugees, are economic migrants, and that is a legitimate point. The fact that a significant portion of them are men is more or less irrelevant. I mean, if all of them would be refugees, that would be just fine, but they're not. So instead of focusing on their sex, a more appropriate focus would be on their status.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But what I do find interesting is sort of the reason why most of these refugees, or whatever you want to call them, are young men, and that part of it is of course because they're fleeing from war, and contrary to what some people want us to believe, men are always the primary victims of war, especially young men.
Yes.
So of course many of them are fleeing from that, and also of course fleeing halfway around the world is not a very easy thing. It's a very strenuous thing. It's very risky, and your young men are more able to do this kind of journey, and they're generally more risk taking. So these are the reasons why there's mostly young men on among these refugees. And what I also found sort of interesting is that in the portrayals of refugees in the media, which is mostly very sympathetic in Germany, most of the pictures you see are indeed of families, of women, of children, not so much of men, because the media do know that just men just do not evoke as much sympathy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and although they're the majority group, they get the smallest amount of exposure. Yes. And it just occurred to me right now. There are even feminist ways to argue against the rhetoric used by Mr. What's his name
Lucke.
again? Lucke. There are even feminist ways. I mean, your party is called Alpha, and you're only calling for women to be granted asylum. What are your intentions there? Maybe there are some patriarchal, nefarious intentions behind it.
Well, yeah, it's pronounced alpha, but it's written ALFA. Stands for some sort of acronym, but I forgot what it stands for.
I see, but that doesn't really matter. I mean, if I sneak this information discreetly within English-speaking feminist circles, I pretty much doubt that anyone would do strenuous fact-checking. And if I launch this discreetly on Tumblr that there is a party called Alpha calling for more women of color to be and only women of color to be brought into white countries for the benefit of all the white men, do you think anyone would start maybe there's more to this story? I don't think so. Sorry, it's in my nature to think on how to use this as psyops. And just because I said it publicly, don't think that I won't do it. I will actually attempt to do this.
Yeah, I mean, how many Tumblr people are going to listen to this show?
Yeah, and even if they will, they're gonna have to look through to the exact timestamp where I'm saying it. So in a podcast of over 1 hour, good luck finding it without actually listening into great detail. So yeah. The more I think about it, the more it sounds like a fabulous idea. I mean,
Yeah.
if this guy wants to go full gynocentric and full feminism on us, I don't know. Let's give him a taste of his own medicine.
What I also find interesting is that that in a way it's actually really good that most of these refugees are young men, because they are the most economically productive people. They tend to be healthy. They can they can basically work harder than most women with children, and from that perspective, it's actually really fortunate that most of them are young men. Sort of from the selfish perspective of the population of Germany and other European countries. Though of course,
Yes.
also young men are also more likely to commit crimes, so on. So that is also a factor that sort of partly compensates for that. But
Yeah, there is a
still,
trade-off, like
still
with
on
everything in
still on
life.
the whole, it's probably much better for them to be mostly young men than basically any other demographic.
Too, although you know, all of that would be fantastic if most European countries wouldn't have these messed up systems where essentially if you come as an asylum seeker, you must be on welfare for a certain period of time, which pretty much makes them a burden rather than a net positive for the society they emigrate into. Because look, in the past, for instance, the people who ran away from Soviet tanks from here to the United States, when they were granted asylum in the United States, they weren't given any handouts. They were like, "Congratulations, you escaped Soviet tanks. Good luck," and that's it. Uh,
Yeah, and I think that's a very reasonable approach to
yes,
let people in, but then have them support themselves. And these sorts
yes.
of laws that forbid people from working is I think is just so stupid.
Hmm.
It's just stupid on every level. It because it of course forces people to be in welfare, which also means that they will be much less integrated into society, because of course
Yes.
having to go to work means you have to talk to people every day, you have to get along with people, you have to
Yes.
go to and from work every day, and that sort of thing. Is really the quickest way of integrating in society and learning to deal with this new culture, learning the new language, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Also, of course, it sort of strains the welfare systems of the receiving countries. Also, of course, um, it creates a lot of enmity between the refugees and the existing population, because they have to pay for these people.
Mm-hmm.
If people were just allowed in and just allowed to take a job and support themselves, I think there would be a lot less conflict over this whole migrant
Yes.
crisis.
Yes, yes, and as much as people hate Mr. Janusz Mykie from the Conservative Party in Poland, he made a similar speech in the European Parliament recently. It was like, uh, even if they're a million, they're free to come into Poland, but they're gonna have to support themselves. There is no welfare available for them. And surprise, surprise, there are very few people wanting to go to Poland, even though some of them go to border areas, Germany, in Germany, in East Germany, and the economic level, the difference in economic level between the two, especially particularly in that area, is minuscule. But in Germany, they're gonna get huge welfare. In Poland, they're gonna get zero. It's only housing,
That's
and that's it. In Poland, you don't get any kind of pocket cash and something like that, none whatsoever. Um, on the other hand, you get full right to work once you get a Polish ID that says asylum seeker or whatnot, and get a social security number. That's it. You can work.
that's interesting. Do you know how long that sort of process takes usually?
A week, maybe two.
Okay, okay.
Maybe two. So yeah, and of course during those 2 weeks until you get processed, yes, you do get food and whatnot. But after that, no, there is no welfare available, and this is pretty much true all over Eastern Europe and Switzerland and a few other countries. But not most of them. Germany has this. Sweden is even worse in this respect. In Sweden, you're not allowed to work at all. Sometimes even a year after arriving in Sweden, because they have this economy almost entirely run by unions essentially. And if you're not a member of the appropriate union, even Swedish citizens have sometimes trouble finding employment precisely because of this system.
Yeah, I mean, in Germany, as long as you're not if you haven't been accepted yet, then you can't work, but you do get welfare in the meanwhile, and that sort of usually takes something like 6 months, maybe a year. So that's quite a long time.
That's a bit
That
slow.
Yeah, it's really slow, and that's the sort of a massive bloated bureaucracy and so on that makes this process extremely slow, and yeah, that's of course a lot of politicians calling for that system to be more efficient and so on, but I don't really know if much is going to come out of that.
Yeah, why not
Maybe
adopt
they'll just institute another commission who is going to oversee that, and maybe add another month onto the average length. I don't know.
Yeah, why not just adopt the Polish system? The Polish system is very easy. They fingerprint you, they do a background check, and if there is nothing to worry about, you get a temporary ID, and then to get other papers, yeah, that takes longer. But at least you get an ID to be able to work. So I don't know. I mean, if I was fleeing from bombs being thrown at me, I would appreciate that far more than being kept in a camp.
Though it, of course, the sort of economic opportunities are of course greater in Germany generally, and also sort of
Yes.
um, as you said, in some of these border areas, the difference is not very big, but still sort of there's a certain prestige that comes with a country like Germany that you don't have in Poland, and a lot of people who are starting out in um, somewhere in Syria or whatever it is, do want to come to a country like Germany, that they rather than
Hmm.
to a country like Poland, because Germany sort of has a pretty good international reputation and so on, and Poland doesn't, or at least not need it to the same extent.
Yeah, and then we add the European bureaucracy on top of that, which wants to impose the quotas. And, my country voted against it, but I was thinking, let's say it is applied, which I sincerely doubt, but let's say it is applied. How are you going to reconcile freedom of movement with quotas?
Yeah, that sort of doesn't really seem to work.
I mean, you have to pick one. You either abolish the freedom of movement of people, or you keep the freedom of movement and renounce the insane ideas of quotas. Because okay, in here maybe they'll find some employment, but for instance, in Slovenia, the economy is tanked at this moment. How are you going to force people to stay in Slovenia other than at gunpoint, essentially?
Well, I guess while they're still sort of being processed and haven't been granted asylum yet, their movement is of course restricted. So there's
Yes.
not free movement for people with that status. But I guess
Oh,
once they've been accepted, I would assume that they would be entitled to free movement.
yeah.
So that
Yeah.
that seems sort of odd.
And let's say that once they've been accepted, they can be only entitled to move around. Go with the same example around Slovenia, and somehow be restricted from going into other nations of the European Union. Okay, but some of them will eventually get citizenship, so it's essentially just a postponing of the problem for, I don't know, a few years until they get citizenship.
But of course, from the point of view of politician, that's all that matters, because 5 years down the line, someone else is going to be in office probably.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah, that's absolutely a good point. Okay, let's move to the next one. It's a very interesting topic, and I really like it. But yeah, it's a bit off topic for this show. So yeah, let's go to the next one.
Okay, this next one is also from Germany, from Die Welt. Child support despite not being the biological father. Her ovulation was ready, and she drove to her boyfriend with a small container. He filled it with another man's sperm. Then back to the doctor. This time the artificial insemination was successful. 9 months later, the woman gave birth to a girl. It was, quote, not the most romantic way of getting a child, unquote, she later said at a judicial hearing in Stuttgart. But, according to the court, it was the probable way in which the now 7-year-old girl was conceived. That girl is now suing for child support. The former boyfriend has long since ceased to want any contact with the child, and he certainly doesn't want to pay for her. This somewhat extraordinary case will be tried on Wednesday at the Federal Court of Justice, or BGH, in Karlsruhe. Depending on how the highest German civil court decides, the case might set a strong precedent. After all, a number of legal questions surrounding the topic of sperm donation are still unsolved. The law is no longer up to date with the new technological possibilities. Quote, we tourists need to learn to deal with the fact that there is more than the normal biological situation with two parents, says Heinrich Schürmann of the German Family Law Forum, or DFGT. The case of the little girl from Stuttgart region is one of these different situations. Strictly speaking, there is no claim to child support against the mother's ex-boyfriend. The man is neither the biological nor the legal father. Quote, one might approximately describe him as a payment person or a payment partner, says family law expert Schurman. The man's relationship with the girl's mother had lasted for about 7 years. The two lived in separate homes. But the relationship was such that the infertile man agreed to an insemination in July of 2007 to fulfill the woman's wish for a child. He even procured the sperm and gave a handwritten agreement to the family doctor which read, quote, I hereby affirm that I will take responsibility for all consequences of a possible pregnancy. As things didn't work out the first time, there was There were two further mutually agreed upon attempts in December of 2007 and January of 2008, according to the woman. The last was successful. On the 18th of October 2008, the girl was born. The man did pay for parts of the initial outlays, let people congratulate him on fatherhood, post for family photos with a newborn, and pay child support for 3 months. Then the payment ceased. He hadn't been involved in the second and third attempt, he claims. The upper state court, or OLG, of Stuttgart didn't buy that and sentenced him to paying child support. The child had, quote, a claim to child support due to an entitling contract in favor of a third party, as the court wrote in reference to a law which had been changed in 2002. And the OLG went one step further. The man's agreement to an insemination with donated sperm constituted an, quote, assumption of parenthood by an act of will. He had thus agreed to support the child like a biological father. If the highest German civil court agrees with this line of argument, this could mean that in the future all partners who agree to such a sperm donation will have to pay child support whether they're married or not. With this appeal to the BGH, the ex-boyfriend wants to avert a child support suit. His chances aren't good. The reformed Article 1600, paragraph 5 of the BGB, the Bürgerliche Gesetzbuch, says, quote, if the child was conceived by artificial insemination via a third party's sperm donation with consent of the man and the mother, neither the man nor the mother may challenge paternity. End quote. For the OLG, the case is clear. The reforms were intended to decouple the obligation to pay child support from biological and legal descent. So
now that's a complicated issue.
Yeah, it's a really interesting case, especially because it's not quite clear whether this man actually agreed to this second and third attempt at artificial insemination, or whether
that's the key of the case. Yeah.
Yeah. So apparently the court doesn't really believe his claim. I don't know how to evaluate that. But sort of if he did agree to all these attempts and he had this sort of document that said that he will take responsibility for all consequences of a possible pregnancy, then it is sort of reasonable that he would have to pay child support given current laws.
Yes, and I'm judging it from a moral perspective. I consider contract law as part of the negative freedom of association. You enter in a contract with someone because you chose to. Yes, you do have to keep your words and keep your end of that particular contract. And that's why I say it's the key of the case whether he did in fact have a similar contract in the second and third attempt, just like in the first one. If that happened, then yes, the mother is absolutely correct. If he does not have, and if he did not agree with the second and third attempt, then the mother is completely in the wrong. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I also have shared that opinion. What I actually found interesting is that this is even controversial. I thought that given current laws, they would already obviously have to pay child support. So that's sort of interesting that that German law has thus far not really recognized this sort of situation.
Well, given that they're not legally married, it's probably the lawmakers didn't even think about such a situation, which is fair. Let's face it, it's a kind of case that doesn't emerge every day.
Yeah, definitely. So I actually was sort of somewhat positively surprised of German law.
Mm-hmm. And it also makes sense, the article that you quoted, the article 1600, paragraph 5, that if it's been conceived by by artificial insemination, neither the mother nor the father can dispute paternity. That, I guess, makes sense in the sense that it protects donors.
Yeah, definitely. That is a good point. Yeah, because then of course if that man, the woman's boyfriend or whatever, um, is considered legally the father, then and of course the biological father is not, and cannot be the legal father.
Mm-hmm.
That is definitely a good point.
And it protects the donors. But I guess this paragraph applies only to legally married couples, and it doesn't apply to this particular situation, which is pretty much the reason of the legal controversy. So yeah, I guess we're gonna have to wait and see what the federal court decides. Uh, but yeah, I mean, the key of the case again is just this: is it true that he agreed to all three of them, or only to the first one, which was unsuccessful? If he agreed, then yeah, absolutely, pay up. On the other
Yeah.
hand, if he did not, the argument that, oh, but he paid for the first 3 months, that's irrelevant. I mean, if I'm in a particular relationship now, and right now, my girlfriend has a child from, I don't know, a previous relationship, or artificial insemination that she decided upon herself without consulting me. Yes, I may want to help her she calls me. I don't know. Do you have $50 until next week because I don't have enough to buy, I don't know, new clothes or new diapers or whatnot? Yeah, sure, I'll help. But that doesn't make me in perpetuity obliged to help.
Yeah, and of course that sort of legal standard would be very pernicious, because then you're punished for helping out. Then
Yeah.
if you help once, then you have to help for the next 20 years or something. That's a rather
Yeah,
stupid rule.
it's the same standard that is in France too. That if a child is accustomed with a particular man and the child sees as a father, even though it's not, then that man is essentially punished and then has to help in perpetuity, or at least until the kid is 18, just because the French psychologists have established that fatherhood has nothing to do with nature, and it's a social construct or something like that.
Yeah,
Which is also the reason why paternity tests are banned in France, by the way.
yeah, it's sort of like with ducklings. Like there's supposedly the first thing they see in their life, that's just what they
Yeah.
recognize as their mother, and that's just sort of fixed, even if it's not even a duck. Uh,
Yes.
Presumably
Yeah.
it works the same way with human children and their fathers.
Yeah. Except that it doesn't, but that's besides the point, I guess. Yeah. So I guess we're gonna have to wait to see what the court decides. But definitely a very interesting case and a bit complicated. To be fair, it is indeed an unusual situation, and
Yeah.
this guy says that, yeah, we jurists have to understand that it's not always yes, but on the other hand, let's face it, as a lawmaker or as a jurist or as a lawyer, you don't expect these kinds of cases more than, I don't know, once in 5 years, probably even rarer than that.
Yeah, I mean, in all of Germany, that certainly occurs much more often than once in 5 years. I mean,
Yeah, but
it is an
from an
unusual case, but not like freakishly outrageous.
fair enough, but from an individual standpoint, as a jurist, how many of these
Okay, okay.
cases you're likely to encounter in your career?
Yeah, probably not very many.
Probably not too many.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's move on to the next one.
Yep.
This is sort of a fun one
Oh
from
God.
Zeit, and not in this sort of in a sort of involuntarily comic way, but actually sort of a fun, light-hearted thing, which also makes some good points. It's called "On the Fear of Compliments." Dear Julia Rothhaas, you are like a dewdrop sparkling in 1,000 colors at the first light of dawn. You have good taste, esprit, bella figura, and common sense for three people. But the dress you're wearing today is the bomb. I write to you since you have complained of not receiving any compliments in the Süddeutsche Zeitung. You bewail that men nowadays were so afraid of striking a wrong chord with a compliment and being seen as sexist that they've simply stopped giving compliments altogether. After a vacation in Italy, a friend of yours raved, I finally felt like a woman again. Back here no one even looks at you. The next morning, as you write in an article, you talk to a male colleague. He said, I would like to compliment you for the dress you're wearing today, but things like that are no longer allowed in Germany. Your article then takes on a slightly embittered tone. Quote, a strange country this has become, in which women have to go on vacation to get some attention. The German man presses his lips together and looks down when he encounters a woman in the office or on the street. No smiling, no talking, anything could be interpreted as an unwanted approach. Is that the direction in which feminism has pushed us? What a mess. Dear Julia, compliments are much like jokes. You're walking a thin line and both are always going to be a matter of taste. One person finds something funny or charming, another disrespectful or harassing. And both are in some sense right, aren't they? With emotions of this kind, there's no right or wrong. It seems we only have two options. Either we refrain from humor and compliments altogether, or we come to grips with the fact that both may sometimes cross a line, so there needs to be some tolerance for error. In anything human beings do, mistakes occur from time to time. I'm just back from my garden, Julia, and I've planted some onions. Only God knows whether I did it right. If the incorrect planting of onions would result in internet outcry against me by the Association of Onion Planters, and if I had to fear losing my job over incorrect onion planting, I wouldn't touch another onion in my life, I swear. The problem with political correctness is that it's always the most sensitive and vulnerable who set the tone. I'm certain that any compliment which would please you, Julia, would be seen as sexist by some other woman. The poor devil giving the compliment would be in all kinds of trouble. After all, the insulted, once they get going, are themselves quite eager to insult. To quote the great Henry Rowohlt, quote, the insensitive are often the most vulnerable. By the way, when was the last time a woman complimented me? For my stylish shirts, my fashionable haircut, or my sexy glasses? Oh, Julia, I don't even remember. As a man, once you've reached a certain age, it's like you're invisible. What a mess. But maybe women nowadays are simply afraid of complimenting me. There's so much fear nowadays.
Yeah, it is. It is a very nice article, and it does make it, the analogy with the association of onions. I enjoyed that one.
Yes, it's sort of a good analogy. I mean, planting onions is sort of this sort of minor benefit if you get some onions, but if the risk is that you might lose your job if you do it wrong, then no one is going to plant onions.
Yeah.
And the same thing with compliments. If a wrong kind of compliment can get you fired in some cases, though that is of course very rare, but it does happen in some cases, then it's probably safer to just not give any compliments.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know how to say. I can't empathize in totality with this point because throughout my entire life I've lived in places where such things didn't exist. I mean, really, having a scandal or having to go to the what's it called in English, the HR office because some colleague didn't like how you complimented, I don't know, her skirt or whatnot. This is the kind of thing that I can't even empathize with. I regard it as utterly insane right from the get-go.
Yeah, it's not quite as bad as that in Germany as it is in the Anglophone countries, but it is still definitely a thing, especially if you're some sort of more well-known person that can get in a lot of trouble with the media, as for example happened with Rainer Brüderle a couple of years ago with this Aufschrei thing, where he made some sort of kind of weird compliment to a reporter who was bothering him when he was at like some hour of the night in some hotel bar room drinking. This reporter came up to him and sort of bothered him with questions and so on, and he made this sort of kind of inept compliments, and this created this huge discussion over sexism in Germany. Yeah.
Yeah. Meanwhile, in here, the president insulted a reporter for keeping on bothering him in his spare time. He was in an official capacity, and 3/4 of the media was like, "Yeah, good for the president." The reporter was a bitch. And the rest of the media was like, well, the president is an asshole, but that's because that portion of the media is usually critical of the president, no matter what he does. So,
Okay.
so yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just don't regard this as something that should happen to begin with. I mean, what happened to the good old common sense? Even the example that you brought. I mean, the guy was drinking late in the night in his own spare time, and you keep on bothering him. And I don't know, I mean, even if he had said, why don't you just fuck off, I think it would still be appropriate.
Yeah, and it's we could talk a long time about this sort of episode, but it's sort of long in the past now. Not long in the past, but it is like a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, or what is it, or 3 years? I don't remember. And it was never really very interesting to begin with.
I see, but yeah, but to the general point, the author is absolutely correct in saying that maybe there should be less fear about this, and maybe, just maybe, a return to that plain old common sense would be in order. I mean, if you don't like a comment made by someone, well, why don't you just do what most of the planet does? You know, just shrug it off.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing if that's is some sort of a co-worker or even a superior who makes this sort of comments all the time, and you've told him repeatedly to stop, and he just keeps doing it. That is one thing. That is sort of genuine harassment. But just sort of one or two comments here and there from someone that can't possibly be harassment.
Yeah, you know, I mean, in France, for instance, you can actually get to jail, although it didn't happen, but few people got fined, and significant fines, something like 4,000 euros fines, because there was recently a case in Le Monde, but it was a small article and wasn't quite high profile, but still the guy complained to the media. He went to work and met one of his colleagues and said, "Hi there. Oh, what a nice skirt you've chosen for today. Nice thing." And that's it. That was the entire episode. And she went on and complained of sexual harassment at workplace, and the guy was fined by the state 4,000 euros. The company shrugged it off because it was a Chinese company, and the company was like, but what's the problem? I mean, the guy hasn't created any problems whatsoever. He's been an employee of ours for like 10 years, hasn't created any problems whatsoever to anyone. So what's the problem? But the state didn't agree, and the state fined him for 4,000 euros. And I'm like, how did anyone win from this? Because the alleged victim didn't win anything. The company didn't win or lose anything, but the guy lost 4,000 euros. How is anything remedied because he pays 4,000 euros to the state?
I guess it generates deterrence. People are deterred from making compliments now.
Yeah, it does generate deterrence, but it's stupid.
Yeah, it's a thing that you don't really want to deter because it's not really harmful. I mean, as yeah, I mean, as Harald Martenstein puts it well in that article, is that any sort of compliment is going to be flattering to some people and annoying to another person. It's but even if it is annoying, it's a very, very minor harm, and it's not worth involving the law for that.
Yep. Yep.
Definitely something that falls under de minimis.
Yep. Okay, let's go to the next one. This one is a follow-up from our topic of last week.
Yep, this is from the Daily Mail. It's called "No Sex Please, We're Robots." Buyers of hit new emotional robot Pepper to sign contract vowing it won't be used indecently. The creators of Pepper, the emotional robot, have forbidden users from using it for sexual purposes, creating sexy apps for it, or reprogramming it to stalk people. 1,000 people paid £1,300 to buy the companion bot within 1 minute of it going on sale in Japan this June, and then £250 a month in rent. Japan-based SoftBank included a clause in the ownership contract which said using the robot for the purpose of sexual or indecent behavior breaks this agreement. Disturbingly, computer pranksters have already reprogrammed the touchscreen hanging from its neck to give Pepper virtual breasts, which makes it shake its hips and moan when touched. It has reignited the debate around so-called sex bots, with one roboticist telling Mail Online that machines which humans can realistically fall in love with are only years away. The revolutionary Pepper is designed to live alongside humans. It reads emotions, gives its owners advice, and makes small talk. The super advanced machine is so human-like that it can mimic human behavior, such as empathy and even love. Its creators, SoftBank, have urged customers, quote, not to develop any sexy, obscene, or violent apps or actions for Pepper. The clause reads that Pepper must not be used for sexual activity and actions for the purpose of indecent acts or acts for the purpose of meeting and dating and making acquaintances of the opposite sex. In a further prohibitive clause, SoftBank simply inserts no stalking into the contract. Unfortunately, the innocent Pepper has fallen into the hands of Japanese computer programmers who rewrote its software and created virtual breasts for the asexual robot. The female developer who created Pepai, a play on the bot's name in the Japanese word upai for breasts, said it was for the purposes of testing sexual harassment. Some experts now say sex robots, far more sensitive, attractive, and emphatic than Pepper, which humans could seemingly fall in love with, are just a few years away. Soon there will be realistic humanoid robots with AI, said Professor Adrian David Cheok, a roboticist at London City University. Quote, some of us will fall in love and have sex with robots. We are entering a completely new territory of ethics and legal issues. We haven't worked out the ethics yet for robots. Professor Cheok suggests the time has come to decide whether robots have rights or not. He added, for example, does sex with a robot when you are married mean you are cheating? Leading robot ethicist Dr. Kathleen Richardson said could seriously damage human relationships. That sentence doesn't make sense.
Said that this situation could seriously damage, I guess.
Something like that, yeah.
Editing in the British media.
I guess they accidentally a word. Quote, sex robots seem to be a growing focus in the robotics industry, and the models that they draw on, how they will look, what roles they would play, are very disturbing indeed, she told the BBC. She believed that they reinforce traditional stereotypes of women and the view that a relationship need be nothing more than physical. Dr. Richardson added, we think that the creation of such robots will contribute to detrimental relationships between men and women, adults and children, men and men, and women. Professor Cheok agrees we need to draw some boundaries when it comes to robot ethicists, robots ethics, but he believes trying to stop humans falling in love with robots is pointless. His research claims that 60% of people could love a robot. To prove this theory, he is developing a kiss simulator called Kissinger, which is being adapted for use in some of the world's most realistic robots. He said, so we can fall in love with robots, and we will think it is alive because they have that empathy that is often extended to non-human things like animals and even teddy bears. Whether it's alive or just electronics, a robot will be alive for all intents and purposes because they emulate life. So just as we give rights to animals, I'm sure we will give rights to robots. Such rights couldn't come sooner for robots in Japan, as it was revealed that Japanese children bullied the robot in public recently when a Japanese man is being charged after attacking a pepper robot in a SoftBank shop.
Sorry, I can't take that seriously. The children bully the robot. Fuck you. No. No, I can't take that seriously. Not now, not never.
Maybe the last time I slammed some sort of machine because it wasn't working, I was actually bullying it.
Yeah. You know, I repair.
Why won't you work, stupid toaster?
Yes, and you know, I repair things. I know how to repair things. And you don't want to know how I behave with my computer when it stops working. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but once in this show, my video card failed. It was like 2 years ago. And I just said be right back and then logged off. You don't want to know what I did to that video card to start working again. So no, I can't buy this. But the robot has been bullied, or whether it's alive or just electronics, the robot will be alive for all intents and purposes. No, they don't. It's property. It's a machine. I can tear it apart if I want to. I paid for it. It's mine. It's like a table. You know, I like my table, but you know, I can also tear it apart if I want to.
Yeah. No, the thing is that at some point in the future, I would imagine there will be machines which will be so advanced that they will be conscious. I think that will happen. So once you get to that sort of point, then you have to go into all sorts of ethical questions of what sorts of rights, if any, should conscious machines have. But right now, that's still science fiction, and these kinds of robots definitely are not conscious, and I don't really see why they should have any sorts of rights. I mean, also this sort of this sort of example that's given here on whether robots should have rights. For example, does sex with a robot when you are married mean you are cheating? That has nothing to do with whether robots have rights. I mean,
Yes.
whether you're cheating depends on, I guess, if you want to call it the rights of your spouse, but it has nothing to do with the rights of the robot.
Yeah,
I
and it's an
mean,
ethical question that is better solved amongst individuals themselves and not by ivory tower academics. I mean, some individuals and some couples may find that okay, some others may not.
yeah,
Uh,
it's like it's the same with the porn or any sort of sex toy or whatever you
mhm,
have.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and these kinds of things should and indeed are better solved by individuals amongst themselves and not by some edict from London City University or whatnot. Uh, I don't think that anyone can find a one size fits it all for such a question. Uh, as for conscious robots, I don't know. I'm a more Neanderthal myself. I regard even animals as property. It's my cow, so I'm gonna kill it and eat it, and I don't give a flying toss what animal rights fucktards believe about that. Same goes with the conscious robot. It's my robot. I paid cash, hard-earned cash for it, and if I want to dismantle it, I'm going to dismantle it, and I don't give a flying toss what ethicists believe about it. So yeah, again, I'm very Neanderthal on that. No, it's property. Period.
Yeah, but when I don't really see how that is sort of the overriding um, sort of moral trump card, because then, by the same logic, they can also argue for slavery among humans, that you can just kill your slaves because they are property or whatever. And
No,
presumably you would be against that.
uh,
Mind if I hop in on this?
please do.
In order
Please
for
do.
it to not be property, it has to be able to show preference. It has to be able.
Why?
It has to
What
be
do you mean
able to
by
show.
that?
It has to be true AI. True AI. It has to be able to be self-deterministic. It has to be able to show preference. Meaning,
But
if
all sorts of
everything else
animals
is
should have
everything
preference.
else is equal, and you ask it to choose, what's your favorite ice cream, and all other things being equal, that it would have a preference via its own ability to taste, then you may consider it something more than mere property. It might just be sentient.
I don't really see why you're conflating property and whether something has is sentient or has or is conscious. I mean, something can be conscious and still be property. I mean, a cow, for example, can show a preference for things, and
sure, but in this case, we're working with an AI, or we're working with AIs in this case. And I know this is going to sound a little biblical, but that are created in our image, that are meant to interact with us in very human ways. And once it's not like we're creating an AI that's doing what a cow does, and indeed, about as far as we've gotten so far with our current AI, has the processing power of a cockroach, maybe a little bit more. So we could just as well say the same thing about a cockroach, that it has a preference for dark places. Oh my gosh, we shouldn't kill a cockroach, and we shouldn't kill a robot that is as smart as a cockroach. But for the purposes of determining whether or not it has rights like a human has, it needs to demonstrate human quality.
Yeah, but the ethicist in this article did not argue for that. It argued for something like closer to animal rights and not closer to human rights.
In that case, it still needs to provide some measure of preference beyond basic programming.
What do you mean by beyond basic programming? Of course,
in other words, it can't just be it can't be something that a programmer just puts in. You're still looking at the capacity to learn. You're still looking at the capacity for something to gain a preference based upon its environment. Take a dog, for instance. Some dogs like some textures more than others. You might have a dog that enjoys chewing shoes more than it enjoys chewing on the stick that you have in the backyard. And given the choice, that dog's going to go for the shoe every time. So, I mean, once again, that is something that is individualized. It needs to be able to be identified as an individual.
So you're talking about a self-learning algorithm that doesn't learn exactly the same thing. I mean, if you have two robots with the same self-learning algorithm implemented, they'll learn and adapt differently in the exact same environment.
Exactly.
Like with the dog, with some of them will eventually prefer shoes and the others will prefer stick.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Once you've achieved that, then you might consider some measure of extension of rights. Until that point, it's no different than my toaster.
Mm-hmm. I understand your argument, but since I'm not a believer in animal rights either, I don't care. I mean, I still think the cows are tasty, and I don't care what animal rights groups think about that.
Well, I mean, in this case, what are you going to do to a robot? Just how would you torture a robot? You understand what I'm saying here, right?
Yes.
I mean, it would have to have an understanding of its own life,
would have
an understanding of its own
in some sense.
It would have to know fear. It would have to know pain. It would have to know these things in order to have rights that protect it from those things.
Yeah, it would have to be conscious. So essentially, your argument is a bit more elaborated, but it's pretty much the same thing what Jon said. It has to be conscious in some sense.
Right now, these robots that exist right now, they're not conscious. They don't have any sort of preferences. They don't have feelings or anything like that. They They're just a sophisticated piece of software and hardware.
Right.
Yeah, it's a sophisticated, from a software perspective, it's essentially FreeBSD that can be scripted fairly easy. I looked around the forums, don't ask me where because I won't tell you. But it's essentially a FreeBSD based software that can be scripted like any other FreeBSD software. So yeah, it's no, I don't know, does my Lubuntu installation flavor has rights? It's pretty much the same question. Does the FreeBSD installed on this particular robot has any rights? No. And also from the contract law perspective, how is this Japan-based company is going to enforce this? I mean, I bought the robot from you. I paid you cash for it. You delivered to me. It's mine. How are you going to prohibit me or forbid me from scripting it and putting whatever I want on its software?
I mean, legally it's sort of the same as all sorts of other license agreements where you buy some sort of particular piece of software, but you're buying a license and you're not allowed to copy it in certain ways, and you're not allowed to change it in certain ways, and you're not allowed
that worked fabulously,
etc., etc.
Or what they'll do is they'll always have it connected. Always have it connected to some larger system for monitoring.
Yeah, that's possible. But I mean, even if that's the thing, the sort of thing can't be rigorously enforced, having these rules in place is basically going to or probably going to be enough for them to cover their asses. When some sort of some sort of a sex bot version of this thing comes out, and the company can say, hey, that's not okay with us. We have you have violated the user agreement and so on. That's it's not our fault that anyone is doing this.
Right. That's just a matter of PR in that case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just a matter of PR because Japan law doesn't apply in my city. I don't give a flying toss what the criminal code of Japan says or the civil code of Japan says or whatever.
The criminal code, it's a contract that you have signed.
Yes, but it's a contract available, valid in Japan only, not here.
At the same time, due to those differences, you may not see exports.
I doubt SoftBank.
I mean, if you do see exports, they're probably going to be black market exports. Look, these asshats who are screaming all over the place about human-robot relationships, and oh my God, they're going to damage human-human relationships. Well, human-human relationships are damaged enough. I hardly think a little more depopulation is going to be the end of the world. In fact, it might be just the kick in the ass that people need.
Yeah, besides, there is no direct correlation. I mean, one can still fuck a robot and still have kids. I mean, it's not a direct implication that just because human-robot relationships would exist, that necessarily comes with depopulation. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, humans having sex is hardly the bottleneck for human reproduction. It's
and there's that.
People having unprotected sex, and because of the availability of all sorts of reliable and cheap methods of birth control, that people can sort of decide if they don't want to be pregnant.
Well, what they're scared of is they're scared of choice, because there are plenty of men out there who will blatantly, considering the environment in which they find themselves, eschew relationships with women, or reduce them to such an amount that the chances of their spawning or spending on luxury items in order to pull taxes, it drops. All of that drops. That's what they're afraid of.
Yeah, that's true, and that's essentially a Ludit attitude. I mean, in the past, people were afraid that that other people will choose cars instead of carriages, that they'll choose whatever. I mean, yeah, choice comes with trade-offs. Well, so what?
Yep. And in this case, just let the market figure it out.
It's going to be bad for some people, just like the introduction of electric lighting was bad for the candle makers, and the introduction of cars was bad for the makers of carriages and horse breeders and so on. It's going to be bad for some people, but
so the
on the whole,
introduction of sex bots are going to be bad for some forms of tax revenue and a few women.
Yeah.
You put it correctly, some forms of tax revenue, because it doesn't mean that that particular revenue won't still exist. It just will end up being as tax revenue through other means, such as VAT for sex robots or sales tax or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to find a way to squeeze blood from the stone.
Yeah.
They always do.
Yeah. And again, for the record, the robot ethicist Kathleen Richardson is one of those two idiots that we thoroughly discussed last week. So, just for the record, it's not a new position by someone else. It's the same two idiots, the Swedish one and the British one. Speaking of Swedish idiots, the next one from the local. Jesus Christ, this is so insane. Swedish pupils told to pen suicide note. Parents have hit out after their 13-year-olds were asked to write a suicide letter in Swedish class. But the school says the controversial assignment was only a misunderstanding. Moms and dads in Skellefteå in northern Sweden were shocked when a number of children came home from school to report that they had been told to write their own suicide notes in class as part of a wider assignment on mental health. We are several parents who become very upset when we heard about this, one parent told Swedish broadcaster SVT on Wednesday. I am completely aghast, said another. The pupils said that they had been listening to an audiobook in class about a girl who wanted to end her life. Afterwards, they claimed they were told to write a letter to the mother in the story, explaining that the suicidal thoughts were not her fault. According to parents, the teens were encouraged to think about their own mothers if they struggled with the assignment. It feels very unpleasant, an unnamed parent told SVT. But school bosses in Skellefteå put the controversy down to a misunderstanding. It's an existing assignment in a renowned textbook that a teacher has used, the council's children and education head Jan Söderström told the national broadcaster. It is very sad that it is being perceived this way, he added, and said that the school, which has not been named in the Swedish media, would be sending a letter to all parents explaining the assignment. What the what?
That was approximately also my first thought.
Seriously? You're putting 13-year-olds to write their suicide notes in an assignment about mental health? I mean, why not put the kids to burn crosses and wear white hoodies in an assignment about combating racism? Why not? Why not? I mean, let's be progressive all the way. Seriously, what the fuck? And the fact that the media has this chilling attitude, the Swedish media, is like, oh, well, it's just a misunderstanding. The school will be sending letters to all the parents and will explain it. No, they won't. No, it's not okay, like, at all.
Yeah, and I mean, this sort of thing can be dangerous. I mean, there's
very dangerous.
The thing is that this sort of exposure to stories about suicide, there's at least some evidence that this can actually lead people to commit suicide.
Yes.
There's, of course, this famous case in what was it, the 18th century back then with Goethe's novel The Sorrows of Young Werther, where the hero commits suicide in the end. And sort of in the wake of that, there was a series of copycat suicides of young men who killed themselves in the sort of the same kind of clothing that's described in the novel, and that there's many such cases where there's reports of suicide in the media, and then an increase in suicide, and people sort of imitating this the way the suicide was conducted, and for that very reason, there's this sort of unwritten law, I guess, in among the media that they don't usually cover suicides, and they avoid writing about that topic because it can lead to imitation.
Yeah, and particularly they avoid giving details about how and why, not about why, but about how. When they do report, they try to avoid as much as possible giving details. And yes, and it makes sense from a common sense perspective too. I mean, if there is someone who might have contemplated in the past, such a report can, and indeed does, as some evidence seems to suggest, push them over the edge. And considering the fact that 13-year-olds tend to be, let's face it, a bit unstable for the most part. Sure, not all of them, but a significant chunk of them, because, you know, it's just the beginning of puberty, and a lot of transformations happen around them, and especially within themselves. That's a period of instability. Giving them assignments about writing their own suicide notes is an extremely dangerous thing to do.
Yeah.
Who is going to take responsibility if one of those kids commits suicide in the next week?
Yeah, it's completely irresponsible.
Completely irresponsible, but what's even more irresponsible is the reaction to the event. I mean, instead of firing the teacher and taking that particularly idiotic assignment out of the curricula, it's like, oh, but it's just a misunderstanding and whatnot. That's even more irresponsible.
And if it's an existing assignment in a renowned textbook, so much the worse for the textbook.
Yeah, so much for the criteria used to become renowned. I mean, maybe those who make renowned textbooks and who make textbooks become renowned, maybe there's something wrong with themselves, too.
Yeah.
If that is the case. I haven't seen the textbook, so I don't know, maybe it's not really that renowned, I don't know. But still, I mean, and particularly if it's a state school, and given the area Skellefteå, as far as I know, there's only one private school in there, so it's most likely it's a state school. Given that it's a state school, it should be even more pressing to take action. This is very serious. And it's not like they confuse kids a little bit. No, this could actually lead to a kid or two die. Surely I hope that doesn't happen, but it's still irresponsible and dangerous.
Yep.
Okay, sticking around in Scandinavia for the last element, coming from Bergens Avisa. He, she, or hen. Now discussing whether children should learn to say hen as they go into the nursery instead of he and she. Should children learn to say hen instead of she and he? The discussion about a gender-neutral term is in full swing. In Sweden, hen has been incorporated in the Swedish language in April. Should the same be done in Norway? The topic came up in a debate on an equality conference organized by men in Barnehage Basjörund on Wednesday. That is the organization of men who teach in kindergartens, men in kindergarten, essentially, MIB. We have had discussions about this, but we're still undecided whether hen should be incorporated in the Norwegian language, says Ole Magnus Hetland, head of MIB Drammen. He is concerned about the traditional gender roles and family constructions and have changed that the traditional roles and family constructions have changed, and that we must not go to the gender stereotypical pitfalls. Kindergartens are much more conscious about this now than in the past, he said. For me, it's about seeing each individual as an individual and be conscious about the great individual differences within the sexes. It is in the uniqueness of every human being that should be forwarded, says Hetland. Yay, everyone is a special snowflake. Anyway, he believes it is important that the adults in the nursery challenge traditional gender roles. We have to be role models for children and facilitate opportunities. Gender should not be a constraint for children's choices, says Hetland. He explains that children should have a rich diversity around them that reflects the community they are a part. Children do not grow up in an A4 family today. Some may have a trans person as a close one, and an increasing number of them have same-sex parents. Now, for the record, an A4 family is essentially an average family with both parents and who own an average house, and the parents tend to have a 9-to-5 jobs and whatnot. So, A4 family is essentially being normal. Anyway, this is something we should talk more about in the nursery, says Ole Magnus Hetland. At the Education Association, the hen debate has also begun. It has set in motion a process of the organization to discuss this, but it is not decided yet. It's a bit of an early stage, says leader of the Union of Education Moscow, Anneliese Sjøgnen-Heien. FRP politician Lavans Kjerulf, who was put in a debate panel, reacted to what he perceived as a zeal to introduce hen in some professional circles. FRP is Fremskrittspartiet, the Progress Party, which is the current governing party, and by the way, it's a Thatcherite right-wing party. So the Progress Party is right-wing in Norway. It is complete and utter nonsense, to put it bluntly. I and we in FRP have trouble taking this seriously, says Kjerulf. There is a difference between the sexes. Trying to deface this difference becomes silly in my eyes. Unfortunately, the insane debate from Sweden has now also arrived in Norway, and this is cause for concern, he adds. Point of information, an increasing number of kids have same-sex parents. No, they don't. There are something like 50 kids who have same-sex parents in Norway. That's not an increasing number, that's an irrelevant number.
But I mean, I would imagine that it's increasing. I mean, it's not a very large number, but it could still be increasing.
If the
number goes from 20 to 50 or whatever, that's still an increase.
Yeah, but Norway has introduced some ways of recognizing same-sex families since as early as '91, and I found a report claiming that in '98 there were like 37 or 38. So yeah, it is increasing, I guess. I mean, in the last 17 years, there's been an increase from 37 to 50 something. That's not enough to modify the language, or definitely not enough to put in some radical transformation, or to assert that, oh, but children do not grow up in a normal family today. Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
I mean, I guess there's a lot more sort of single motherhood families and the sort of these kinds of patchwork families where you have people being divorced and then remarried, or living with a boyfriend or girlfriend, and this sort of thing, I guess, is quite common.
It is quite common, although, to be fair, far less common than in Sweden or in Britain. Norway, for all intents and purposes, is generally quite a conservative country. Considering the circumstances, given that the insane neighbor that they have, it's actually remarkably normal. So, no, it's not really that common as one would expect from a nation with the geographical position of Norway. Because, and one of the reasons is because, we have a fifth, or actually a bit more than a fifth, more like 30% or 40% of the population living in the Oslo area. And then the rest of the country lives in the very small towns and villages throughout the rest of the country. Norway is very big territorially, even though it has a very low population. So, most people actually do not get exposed to this kind of nonsense and have not adopted quote-unquote modernity in terms of these things. And they still do hold dear the ideals of having a normal family and stop messing around and taking responsibility for your actions and things like that. They haven't adopted such a hedonistic worldview as is the case in Britain or in France.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what always strikes me as interesting is when they identify these role models imposing gender roles and so on. it never seems to occur to them that it might also be bad to impose these different kinds of gender models onto people, of imposing this sort of leftist progressive worldview, this social justice world, where that this might also be possibly harmful. Never even occurs to them.
Yeah, it never does. It never does, and not only that, but I mean, for all the talk about freedom of choice and whatnot, how is that freedom of choice if you're essentially replacing what you perceive as an imposed system with your own imposed system?
It means you're not free to choose the right thing.
Yeah. It's pretty much like the European Union. Companies should be free to choose, but provided that they choose to employ more women, something like that. This kind of mentality never ceases to amaze me on how many people actually fall for it.
Yeah. As for the whole thing of hen, I've said this before on the show, is that having some sort of gender-neutral article, I think, is generally a good thing, as long as
it's not an article, it's a pronoun.
Oh, sorry, a pronoun. Sorry. A gender-neutral pronoun is, I think, having that is generally a good thing. I don't oppose that, as long as you don't just use it in all cases. If you use it in cases where you're not certain what sex the person you're talking about is, or if you're just talking about sort of people in general without talking about a particular sex, then I think using a gender-neutral pronoun is quite a sensible approach, and having such a word is not a bad thing. But if you teach people from an early age that they should just refer to everyone as hen, just because that's part of some sort of progressive leftist ideology, then that's a bad thing, obviously.
Yeah, actually, Norwegian does have a gender-neutral pronoun. It's called det, D-E-T, and you can use that one if you're not particularly sure about the sex of one person, or if you're talking about a person in general, or you can use, just like in English, a person and person. So, I mean, there is already that exists in the Norwegian language, and unlike Swedish, Norwegian actually does have, just like Latin languages, male gender, female gender, and neutral gender. So.
But do you actually talk about the neutral gender when you're talking about some sort of unknown person? Is that
yes?
Thing you can do? Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I mean, of course, English, for example, also has a neutral pronoun, but talking about a person as an it would just be very impolite.
Yeah, that's impolite. But no, in Norwegian there is no, as far as I know, there is no negative connotation to referring to a random person as they. So and again, if and also Norwegian has these things as polite pronouns and whatnot. For instance, in English, if it's you and you're talking with the prime minister, it's still you. In Norwegian, it's not. Just like in Latin languages, there is a special pronoun for using a referential pronoun. So you can use all kinds of these things that already do exist. There is no reason to introduce a new word. And more importantly, as you said, if that would be introduced as as a gimmick or whatnot, that would be probably less controversial. But to put it in kindergartens to teach kids to refer to anyone as hen because it's impolite to assume that they're men and women, that's insane.
Yeah, it is insane, and it might be a nice thing for like point something percent of the population who are indeed intersex or whatever you want to call it. But for 99 point something percent of the population, that's just completely unnecessary, and it's just silly to force everyone to do this sort of thing.
Yes, and although to be fair, I mean, Norway actually does have quite a strict evidence of people who are intersex, and since there is a small population overall in Norway, you can actually find interviews with every single one of them because there are not too many of them. And if you look into what those people are saying, it's usually they try to, as much as possible, to discover and assume one gender identity, and they don't want to be this neutral thing going around and confusing everyone, because it's confusing to them too and they don't like it. So not even for that particular minuscule category, that's not useful and or polite.
Yeah.
Okay, then I think we've done pretty much everything we planned to do in this show. We've been going on for like 100 minutes. I think that's pretty much enough. I don't have anything more to add. So with that being said, Mr. Gunnarsson, any final messages?
Take the red pill.
Take the red pill. Mr. Huff, please take us out.